Around the apple trees in October, there was a wonderful aroma of ripening, of decaying and fermenting fruit, in the weeds and grass, as yellow jackets hovered and feasted on the spillover from the harvest. Each wasted apple usually had a good side. And once you rescued it from the yellow jackets, there was a bite or two to be savored on each. And every apple, even those from the same branch, tasted slightly different. On the hillside, apples rolled against a log or accumulated in a ditch or hollow place in a treasure of ripening and fermenting fruit, scintillant with bees and yellow jackets. The hillside was perfumed and teeming. The meadow mold called from the garden, and smaller crickets struck their mellow notes in the meadow and in the grass at our feet. As leaves turned yellow on tulip poplars and the hickories on the pasture hill, the squirrel season began. After school, I heard the crack of rifles and boom of shotguns from the ridges and distant hollows. A shotgun blast sometimes echoed and re-echoed from the mountains. With cooler weather, the grubs, called wolves, were disappearing from the squirrel's fur, and their nut-fattened flesh was perfect for making pies and stews. It always surprised me to see frost stuck like little arrows to fence wire and straw and posts when I went out early in the morning to feed the stock and milk the cows as the weather got colder. A heavy frost seemed like another blossoming on the fields of goldenrod and aster that had been so colorful just days before. In the first sun, the frost glistened like opals. I don't remember anyone on Green River trick-or-treating in those years, but we carved jack-o'-lanterns from pumpkins and lit candles inside them on porches for Halloween. Oddly enough, the term jack-o'-lantern was used to describe a light that appeared like a guardian spirit to someone injured or lost in the woods. Old-timers often talked of being saved by jack-o'-lanterns that appeared when they were desperate or stricken with sickness back in the mountains, far from home. The jack-o'-lantern was a luminous shadow that appeared and silently led them to safety. For a young boy, the most dramatic event of the fall was probably the hog killing. After the first hard freeze, the men of the neighborhood gathered to butcher hogs at each other's houses. At daylight, water was heated to boiling in a cauldron in the barnyard, and the hog shot in the pen and dragged to a platform of boards for scalding. They splashed smoking water on one side of the hog to loosen the hair, and then the carcass was turned over and the other side splashed. The scorched skin gave off a peculiar, unforgettable smell. With hunting knives and butcher knives, the hair was scraped off the hide. The hog's throat had been cut to drain most of the blood, and slits were made in the shanks of the hind feet where the gambrel stick was fitted at either end between the tendon and bone. The gambrel stick was slid up a pole where the hog was hung high enough for the front feet not to touch the ground. The belly of the hog was split with a knife and an axe, and the carcass gutted. Once the head was cut off, the body was carved into sections, and the offal buried in the garden. Every part of the hog was used, including the brains, considered a delicacy when fried with eggs and onions. Best of all was the tenderloin and fresh ribs that could be fried for dinner and for breakfast the next morning. The hams and shoulders got salted down and stored in the smokehouse. Some years my father smoked the hams if he had time to keep the fire going day after day. More often the meat was left to age on the shelves of the smokehouse above the jugs of sorghum. For the women, the work of hog killing had only begun. They chopped smaller remnants of pork into pieces to be fed into the sausage grinder, to be squeezed out in meaty threads and mixed with pepper and spices to make fine sausage. The peppery sharpness was perfect with grits on winter mornings, along with biscuits sorghum,